Welcome to Breaking Through the Contradictions. The goal here is to review some of the common contradictions we have lived and have had various conversations about and how it impacts various areas of a child's growth. We invited different parents, business owners, and friends to have a candid conversation on how some of the contradictions we live contribute and or creates larger barriers to supporting our youth. The views and opinions expressed by the guests, speakers, and participants in this context are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the organizers, hosts, or any affiliated individuals or organizations. We encourage open dialogue and diverse perspectives, but the individual viewpoints shared during this discussion are personal and should not be attributed to any collective entity involved. Okay. I made it. We made it. Yay. I don't know. Sometimes it's a little funny. It's weird sometimes, but sometimes I don't know how we make it. So it's just amazing. So, hi, Catherine. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Tabitha?
I'm doing good.
I'm good.
I don't know. Everybody all the noise just kicks in all at once. So my apologies. I'm doing good. It's a Monday. We're doing this a little early, but I do believe that it's as well worth the conversation. So tell everyone who's going to join us in this stream who you are and what you do.
Okay, I'm Catherine, and I am the creator of the Preschool Art Expert. And the Preschool Art Expert provides resources for parents and teachers of preschool children. So there are books, and I'm also doing consulting. So if anyone needs help setting up their preschool art program, I can help with that. And
very nice.
That's pretty much it.
I like it. First of all, when I met you and I start talking to you, I didn't realize art, right? I remember growing up and having to take art and, finger painting and all this other stuff. And then my kids had to do it too. And so talking to you and learning a little bit more about you, I've actually learned that art is extremely important to the creativity of each one of us.
Yes.
Even people like myself who say, I'm not that creative, right? But I don't think that's necessary. I have come to believe now that is not true. And so I appreciate what you do.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, it's taken me a minute. So today, because we do breaking through the contradictions here, we actually have conversations definitely about things those strange contradictions that actually, I think in some cases can kind of do harm to our children. Because when we pass them down, we pass down that same contradiction that we struggle with, but then we turn around and give it to another kid. And then they are saddled with that. So I was excited when you said the one that you wanted to go after. So the one that bothers you the most is don't talk to strangers. And then we require them to say hi to a stranger. Yes. And I was like, yes, let's get to this one because this was one of mine too. So share with me a little bit why that bothers you so.
Well, on the one hand, you're telling your children not to talk to strangers, which seems to make sense. You don't talk to strangers because you want to keep your children safe. But then at the same time, you walk into a grocery store and a stranger says hi, and you say hi to that very stranger that just said hi when you're teaching them not to talk to strangers. So to me, that's extremely contradictory and confusing. If I were a little kid, it would absolutely confuse me.
It has in the past for myself. It has for others. And here's the thing about it. So I'm glad that this is the one you chose. And I'm glad I'm doing this with you today, right? So yes, don't talk to strangers. Strangers are bad. This, that, and the other, right? But then we'll say we rely on the kindness of strangers. Yes.
Yeah, that one too. Yeah.
Strangers can be helpful. Strangers are just community members we have not met yet. Right. That's kind of how I look at it. So if you're going to a grocery store that's all the way on the other side of town from where you live, when you say, when you go to that grocery store, that community is not somebody that your child may come into contact with often enough to say, hey, that's the neighbor down the street. So he is a stranger, sort of, kind of, but he is in the area. So he could be looking out for you. But at the same time, until you kind of introduce them to these people, they still remain strangers. Then the other thing about it is that, so all of your teachers are strangers before you get to know them, before you drop them off, right?
Yes.
So that was the first thing I thought about when you said it. I think about, when we go and do the meet the teacher
Mm-hmm.
right before we start school. So you're getting them familiar. This is not a stranger. But at the same time, I feel like we shouldn't shut everybody out. We should not definitely shut everyone out of our world of being a stranger, but
Right.
sometimes those strangers help us. So I don't know, how do we overcome that is a really good question.
And that's just it. It's the question. So if I'm a child, especially since I work so much with preschoolers, I'm thinking of that age group. But even older children, if you're telling them, don't talk to strangers, but then in the grocery store, someone says hello and you tell your child to say hello, that's confusing. So, how do you explain to them? In this case, it's okay to talk to a stranger. In this case, it's not okay to talk to a stranger. And why or why not? And what's the age group? And you have to break it down into pieces that they'll be able to understand according to their age group.
Right. Okay. So I get it. So for me, I don't remember ever having requiring my children to actually speak to strangers.
Yeah.
I thought that because I moved around enough to say that it's just probably not the healthiest thing to do. I feel like we really needed to be mindful of our surroundings. But I just posted today about a little 5-year-old that was dropped off at the wrong bus stop, and he was ringing doorbells, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, no, so he found his mom, but he asked, can you please help me find my mom? Because I'm someplace I'm not supposed to be. That in that instance, it's kind of hard because that child needed somebody else's assistance. And
Right.
that 5-year-old needed an adult to do an adult thing, which is make the
Mm-hmm.
phone calls, because I don't know my home phone number, or I don't even know which street I live on, or whatever. So those things actually set into that. But if we go back to the grocery store one, that here's the thing, the other side of that. If you are a stranger and do not know that child, why are you talking to that child? And why? I mean, I don't get that part. Now,
Well, I'm guilty of it too, because if I see a cute baby somewhere, I say, "Oh, what a cute baby," and I'll say hi. So I'm guilty of it also.
so am I. Because you see those babies, and a couple of them uh, couple of them are crying, or they're just totally out of it, and it's just terrible, and the parents can't seem to calm them down.
Mhm.
So sometimes I find myself talking to them to kind of
Mhm.
soothe their little souls, so that they
Yeah,
can be a little bit more open to the love and the response of their parents, right? And so at that point, I think it's more like a community member lending a hand. And so I kind of see
right.
that. So this might be one of those contradictions that we just have to go into it with the understanding that, hey, I know I'm a stranger, but I would like to help you, and I would like
Mhm.
to no longer be a stranger, right? And then you kind of get to know these people and get to help and support, because community
Absolutely.
members are not always going to be people that you know exactly.
Right. And I agree with that. And I agree that there are a lot of people who may be strangers who may be helpful. For example, the one you just gave, the little boy who was ringing the doorbells because he needed somebody to help him. So, how did he know? Was he going to be safe? Was he not going to be safe? Had his parents talked to him about this? And when we are talking to children, where do we set those boundaries? And how do we explain so that they understand? And I think that is the part that I think is so confusing, because on the one hand, we're saying do this, but on the other hand, we're saying do that. And there are no clear boundaries about when or how that changes.
So, okay, so I see that. So what about, I think it, so man, my just thoughts are just racing. The one thing is, because I notice it's actually shows up way more often than we think. Than I realized, right? So I'll own it as my own, as I realized. So as I was thinking about it, because when we go, so as we're going through this whole entire process, we're leery of everyone who is not, who is not us, or who is not, someone we don't know. But when kids
Mhm.
go away to school, so when they go away to college, they're now on their own to try to figure out how do they build certain relationships, right?
Right.
So what you're kind of explaining is can potentially help them in the long run, because now that we're having this discussion, it actually looks and appears as though it might be longer impacting than what I originally was considering. Because when you're 5, you shouldn't be made to speak to somebody who makes you uncomfortable, right?
Right.
And those are people we don't know. And children, I believe, are a very good gauge as to
Mhm.
the type of people and the intentions of the people who want to pick them up, right? You'll have those children who will, and I've heard the parents say they will go to anybody, right?
Mhm.
Not necessarily. There's some people they won't go to. And people with what people call like those dark souls, people who don't have very good intentions,
Yeah.
kids respond to that. They
Absolutely. I,
respond.
I definitely agree. They have some kind of internal system where they can pick up. I do agree with that.
Yes, because there are times when you see kids and they're just like, I just don't, I just can't. Go hug him. Go hug your uncle. Go
Mhm.
hug your person. Go hug
Mhm.
my friend. Hug her. No. If they say no, the answer is no.
Right.
And you know what? It's either they're not open to it for whatever reason, or something is wrong, or whatever, or they're just not a good mesh or match for their body, for their person,
Yes.
right?
And yes, children have that. I do believe that children have that gut instinct, and I believe in that myself. And
Right.
I think that they pick up. They pick
So
up signals.
yes, and so we need to kind of take some of those signals, because we have a tendency, we're like, oh, I just got to hurry up and get to, or I'm got to make my way to this. And it kind of starts to blur our intuition and our gut, so that we're looking, is it the mind that's telling us this is not a good idea? Or is my gut, my intuition telling me this is not necessarily a more favorable experience with whomever this is, right? We've all met them. We've gone to these events, or gone to different, you've gone to a family gathering and you're like, hey, here's my boyfriend. And he reaches out and hugs, and you're like, wait, no, I'm pretty sure this is not, no, we're good. And it's not necessarily
Yeah.
meant to be sexual or anything like that. It's just whatever that energy is, it wasn't good.
Mhm.
But I see
Yeah.
the impact being longer, right? Because when you look at it for the young adults that are going out on their own and they go to school, right? They go to college, they are thrown into a whole entire vat of strangers on top of strangers on top of strangers.
Yeah.
Ones that teach them, ones that bed with them, ones that hang out with them, ones that learn from them, learn that they want all of this, right? And then you're saying they get this sense of this calming sense that says it's okay, I'm in a new environment, and these are just not my friends yet. Yes.
Mhm.
And then some of them find out that, oh, I'll just hitch a ride. If they're on the campus, they might not be so bad. Or he's a security officer and he works for here, so he's not
Mhm.
so bad, right? And that's, I think, is where some of the lines really get blurred for children, for young adults and children, because
Mhm.
we haven't provided, I think, to a certain degree, um, steps and thought
Yes.
and questions. How do you
Right.
vet a person? No longer so vet them to move them into the acquaintance category
Mhm.
before you just make a decision to engage with them.
Right. And I think the point that you make about older children and children or young adults really going to college, it's a very valid point, because it differs from the preschool child to the elementary child to the high school child and then the young adult. All of these things are different. The people who are strangers, or how you can talk to people, is different. So again, everything is blurry. The lines are blurred, where who's okay to talk to, who's a stranger, who's not a stranger, and how do you teach that at these different levels and different ages for all of these children.
That's a very good, that's what I'm saying. So yes, I agree 100%. Is definitely other points to consider. So what is it that we need to do in order to solve that problem? Or what is it? So what do we teach them? Because first of all, critical and independent thinking goes hand in hand with art and music in schools. They have been not history, but the studies have shown how much those two groups, that creative section actually helps to improve the critical and independent thinking of each and every one of us. So that's one of the reasons why this was a really good conversation for you and I to have. But what are the techniques or strategies you think that we as parents should use? Because we've talked about different areas where this will definitely impact them and where it does make a difference. And hopefully there's no one saying, oh, that's not real, that's not true. Just think about it in general. Is it possible that when we say don't talk to strangers, but did you hear him? He said hi, say hi back. Why? So at what point should we no longer be pushing that? One, two is what steps should we take? Because this is going to be year over year that we're going to be teaching this, because this is not a one and done type of a teaching. This is a repetitive thing, because getting them in tune with themselves to say this is right or wrong is our responsibility as parents. And then as the village continues to support that, we need to be able to provide that information for them, so that when they teach their children, they understand, when this person makes you feel like this, maybe you shouldn't do that. So do you have a few steps do you think that we can use to do that?
So, I don't have anything that I think definitely works. And I think that this is a good topic because it brings the question up. And I think possibly just to make people more aware that this is only one piece of all of the other contradictions. There are others that we could talk about, but this one I think is a big one. It's one that I see and one that I hear and one that I've probably used. So how do we solve it? And again, I go back to, it's going to be different for different ages. So the younger child, you're going to have to break it down into pieces so that you can explain it to them. Like if you're in the grocery store, obviously, if they're tiny, they're going to be in a cart. And if somebody says hi, well, it's okay to say hi because they're just somebody in the grocery store that you're walking past and they're just being friendly. But in that child's mind, they are not at the age where they're reasoning yet. So they can't understand that. Now, to a child a few years older, they might be at that stage and you might be able to put it like that to them. And of course, as they get older and older, things will change. So I'm not sure that I have a definite answer, but I do think that it's something that people should be aware of.
Okay. So actually, I think you gave the answer. I seen an answer in that. I don't know why you didn't see an answer in that.
Well, I just think that it's going to be different depending on the age. And that's really the only thing that I can say, because, if you're talking to a young adult who's getting ready to go into college and you're saying to them, don't talk to strangers, it sounds a little bit funny, but you may say something like, okay, well, if you see a person that you don't recognize and they look like they're kind of not supposed to be in that environment, or they look a little, maybe, who knows, maybe they're on drugs. You kind of have to learn to recognize the signs. Now, of course, it's different for that age group than it is for the young child. So that's the point I think that really needs to be made, is that it's different depending on the ages.
So that's why I said you actually gave me the answer. It's very funny, and I think that other people are going to figure it out too. Here's what I learned from you today. One is that because you not learned but been reminded of, right? Because I did recognize it before. Age appropriate conversations and guidelines is what's extremely important. But the one thing, and the very first thing is to trust your gut, right? We are given an intuition on purpose with the understanding that as human beings, our whole entire goal, as long as we're breathing, is to survive. What that survival looks like is 100% up to the experience we're having and the journey we're on, right? So for a child, when they're really young, it's okay to say hello to baby. It's okay to have a conversation with a baby, because they want to know they're looking at you and they're learning from you. They're learning from their parents. They're learning from the people around them. They can tell the difference between us. Oh, that's an old man. He looks like my papa. Or, oh, wait, is that my dad? Is that my dad's twin? You don't really know. So I do believe it's more age appropriate conversations, and they need to be I know people don't like the word need, but here's a deal. They really need to be in a place where they're able to discern between the groups, to be able to allow them the ability to say that person's good, that person doesn't feel so great to me, but allowing them we need to reinforce their own intuitions, because that is what helps to save lives and save people in general. Because my intuition may be different from yours, but our matches are not the same either. What I mean by that is that both of us can go into a movie and see the same identical movie and come out with two different perspectives.
Yeah.
Both of us can see the same guy and look at him, and we have two totally different responses. That same guy can approach the both of us, and I will get a creepy feeling, and you'll be like, no, I love him. Yes. So people have to understand that everybody is going to receive very specific people that complement and does well for them in their system, however they are set up. So my recommendation is always going to be to support the child in a way that helps them understand that they are their own individual person, and that they are entitled to be able to express themselves in that way. And so if their intuition says one thing and yours says something different, until they kind of sharpen theirs, then you're their guide, right? But helping them to understand and learn what they're looking for. Ask very valid questions, figure out where they are. But for the younger kids, say hi. It's okay to say hi. Hi. Well, can I go to them? No, ma'am. No, sir. We're not doing that. Because that right now is a stranger. And until that changes, this is where we are. So one, be age appropriate when you're talking to children, whether it's in a grocery store, whether it's your own kids, whatever, but be age appropriate. So if they're too young to understand that you don't like that person, or that person's a stranger, you're the guide for that. When they get to so once they go into school, it's important them to understand you're going into now the world, and the world is full of people we don't know yet.
Right.
And then from there, what do you do? These are key questions that can be asked or answered of yourself to determine whether or not that's a good person to keep your secrets. Not all secrets are meant to be kept, to have a conversation about or with, or to go to when you're in trouble, right? So there are things that they need to learn in that case. And I believe that to a certain degree, we need to be saying, you need to check in with self. Is this person a person that I can trust? Or is this a person that my mom would want me to have a conversation with? And is this a space or a place I should be? Is that something that my parents would be accepting of, right? And then we move on. So then when we get to the high school age, because middle school, junior high, them jokers, they're just a whole bunch of funniness, right? I mean, I've met some of them.
Yeah, have you ever been in a classroom with them?
Yes, it's crazy because all I say, I've never met a stranger. I'm like, no, we meet them all the time. We convert them. You convert them to acquaintances. We convert them over into coworkers. We
That's right.
convert them into friends. But what is it? What is it that makes a good friend, right? So you go from stranger to friend.
Yeah.
What makes a good friend? What does that look like?
Yes, and these are the things that need to go into this conversation, this topic, because these are the things that these young people need to be made aware of. How do you discern? How do you decide? What is the feeling that you get? I'm always telling my granddaughter, trust your gut.
But you have to help her. I hope you're helping her. I'm pretty sure you are helping her to understand what does that feel like and look like. Because for the most part, for me, in one sentence they were like trust your gut, but in the other sentence they would say you're not old enough to know better. And we can't have it both ways. You have to go one way or another with that, because sometimes I trust my gut and it tells me no, and you push me into a person that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. So hopefully there's some of those things that we do by just helping to improve their trust of themselves, because we have to learn to trust ourselves and what we have. And that's for those students, those children.
Yes. And I think that for them to learn to trust their intuition is like you were saying earlier, they need to learn to trust that. And I think that's a very good point. And it may not be one that's brought up often enough.
Yeah. So that's a big one. So then when we go into high school, it's important for them to now exercise that, right? So we have all had it where our children have gotten these friends and they're excited about these friends, and they're like, Mom, I can't wait till you meet my friend. It's an awesome person. And then you meet this child and you're like, that is the devil. And this kid is loving him. And so then you start to wonder. But I always go back to the one thing. We are matched differently. We gravitate to things that complete us in one way or another sometimes, right? So I may not like that same guy you like. I may think he's a jerk. But that doesn't make me wrong, and that doesn't make you wrong. That just means that they are not the right puzzle piece to fit in that position for me. Not for both of us, just for me. So, because I've had some children and I was just like, that kid is amazing. I wish you could be friends with them. And they're like, I don't like them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Then I've had those other ones where I don't like your friend. And they're like, oh, but I love them. That's because my journey, my experience is not equivalent to theirs. So I just feel as though, yes, there are tons of strangers on this planet. I get it. I believe that they're only strangers now. They don't need to be strangers forever, because depending on what picture of your life that you are building for yourself will determine when and how you will add strangers into acquaintances, into friends. And then only you can figure that out. So for us, one, be careful who we're talking to in the store and what messages we're sending. Two, it's not as simple as to just say, don't talk to strangers. You have to elaborate on that and make it a point to say that it's just not a good time for us to convert that person, or I'm too busy to do that, right? They don't meet the certain requirements.
Right, exactly. It depends on the situation. It depends on the environment and the situation. Yes.
Yes. And three, keep the line of communications open. So you will be able to learn where the discernment comes into play as soon as we make the decision to listen and to be able to communicate. You don't know they're getting in a stranger's car until you open up the door of that conversation.
Right.
A lot of things that we befall is because somebody may not have been able to put their 2 cents into whatever situation it is. But children are nothing but sponges, and they're sucking up everything and anything they can from us. And so I would just be mindful of the people that we bring around and what we're forcing our children to do versus what we're telling them not to do. Because remember, I was told to and when in doubt or when you have a problem, go to the police. But right now, that may not necessarily be, that's not all that needs to be said, right? You can't go to every police officer but you do need to be very discerning about which police officer you go to, because not all of them are here to protect. And people in uniform change uniforms.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So I want to repeat that. A police officer's uniform has been used in other spaces and places. And what happens is a child just sees it as a police uniform, and the person in the uniform is not a police officer.
Right.
So we have to be careful of what we're saying, and it has to be followed up with life lessons and opportunities to continue to teach.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yeah. And again, it's also age appropriate. How do you explain age appropriateness to which age group?
I think that's great. So I think that works really well. So I am so excited that you decided to come and hang out with me for a few minutes and talk about this contradiction. And I hope that people get something from it, because this is not an opportunity for us to say, wag our fingers at folks and say, oh, you're doing a bunch of things wrong. Nope, that's not what it is. Words are power, and we have to remember to use them wisely. Our children are watching and using us as an example for how they're going to move forward. So, Catherine, how can people get in contact with you? What do you think that you want people to reach out to you and talk to you about art? Or,
I'd love for people to reach out to talk about art and and their preschool programs and their children and workshops. Yes, so they can find me at the preschool art expert at gmail.com to email me, or they can go to my website, thepreschoolartexpert.com.
Awesome. Well, maybe you can come back again and talk about another contradiction.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I think we're going to continue having a conversation about. So I do greatly thank you for your time, for spending it here with us. And until next time. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate the support and look forward to you visiting us again next week. Same time, same place. Until then, words are power. Please remember to use them wisely. If you have an interest in discussing a contradiction or would like to be on our live show, please let us know and send us a direct message.